Welcome to Sectors Up Close. I'm Elena Casas. Today we're looking at Israeli stocks, and my guest is Stephen Schoenfeld, CEO of MarketVector Indexes. Israel's war against Hamas has sent shockwaves through its economy. Since Hamas gunmen massacred civilians in border towns on October the 7th, roughly 8% of the workforce has been called up for reserve duty in the war in Gaza, while an estimated 400,000 people have been evacuated from their homes as authorities empty towns close to the restive border with Lebanon. 1 in 3 Israeli businesses report they've closed since the war began, as tourists stay away and discretionary consumer spending slows to a trickle. The shekel fell dramatically at the outbreak of war, but has since staged a recovery after intervention by the Bank of Israel. On Monday, the central bank said it would provide the banking system with up to 10 billion shekels, that's $2.6 billion, to help small businesses access low-interest loans. Israeli stocks have also been remarkably resilient. This is the VanEck Israel ETF, tracking the broad Blue Star Israel Global Index. After dropping about 13% in October, it has recovered most of those losses. Well, for more, I'm joined now by MarketVector Indexes' Stephen Schoenfeld. Stephen, hi. This resilience in Israeli stocks does seem unlikely given everything that's going on. Why have stocks recovered?
So there's a variety of factors. Obviously, as you noted, both Israeli equities fell off sharply and the shekel dropped precipitously, hitting a multi-year low. The Bank of Israel intervened initially gently, but then more strongly. And just as their intervention got going, the dollar started to weaken. So that also helped the shekel. With regard to Israeli equities, they got quite oversold, and there's value there. Unfortunately, Israeli companies are used to operating in challenging circumstances with security threats and some of their staff out for military duty. And the whole country has mobilized. And we've seen this across the economy as well as with specific companies. So the recovery has been a lot quicker than I would have expected, but I was expecting a recovery. So it's good to see the market reflect that.
You mentioned that the Bank of Israel has stepped in to prop up both the shekel and businesses through low-interest loans, but can it afford a long war?
So of all the institutions within Israel, the Bank of Israel is most able to support both the shekel and give out subsidized loans. It went into this crisis with a record high foreign exchange reserves, and it still only used a small percentage for the intervention, but enough ammunition, as you noted, almost $3 billion to make a difference. In addition, the ability to give out low interest loans, the Bank of Israel has the resources. The bigger concern in the long term, if the conflict continues, is Israel's fiscal policy. Israel has been running historically low debt to GDP, but they can afford, just as they did with COVID, to issue more debt and fund recovery. There are many hundreds of thousands of people displaced around the country. The Israeli government is paying for their housing. So hopefully this conflict will reach a conclusion relatively soon, and then Israel can start recovering.
The high-tech sector makes up about 18% of Israel's GDP. We spoke about this before the war, back in the summer, and you were very bullish on Israeli tech firms. But how do you feel about them now? How are they coping with this situation?
So Israeli tech firms were underperforming going into this crisis, partly because of domestic political turmoil. And I was optimistic from a value perspective then. They certainly were hit disproportionately since October 7th. However, these companies, amongst all of Israeli companies, are amongst the most resilient. They actually have more like 20% or more of their staff in the reserves, but they're very accustomed to redeploying resources, to mobilizing staff, even family, to deliver on time. And again, they were so oversold relative to global tech that as global tech has rallied this month, Israeli tech is keeping up and in some ways surpassing it, with some major Israeli tech companies near all-time highs.
You mentioned then that some of these companies are undervalued still. As we look forward, hopefully, to the end of the current conflict, do you see buying opportunities here?
Absolutely. A broad basket of Israeli tech is trading at amongst its lowest comparative valuation compared to European tech or US tech in history. Tower Semiconductor, as an example, has met all of its commitments, and they said so in their third quarter earnings. Wix.com, while it has 2,000 people in Israel, it has 3,000 people outside of Israel. So they're sharing the burden, and they delivered very strong earnings.
Stephen Schoenfeld, CEO of MarketVector Indexes, thanks so much for that insight. And that's
Thank
your
you.
roundup of Israeli stocks. I'm Elena Casas, and this is Reuters.